The Zionist entity is facing humiliation. It has effectively conceded defeat, as one Zionist protester against the ceasefire stated, "Do not sign a deal that means surrender, sacrificing the remaining kidnapped and giving up Israel's security." You see, anyone who studies the details of the ceasefire agreement that has been provisionally reached, set to come into effect on Sunday, January the 19th, will inevitably conclude that Israel has been forced into a humiliating agreement. This ceasefire means they've lost against the Palestinians of Gaza. Look, I know this ceasefire, while welcomed, is also a bittersweet moment. We obviously welcome that Israel is stopping its onslaught, but what we've witnessed over the past 15 months is beyond belief. The death, destruction, cruelty perpetrated by the Zionist entity, is grotesque. People being burnt alive, murdered while holding white flags, tens of thousands killed, most of them women and children, thousands of homes destroyed, famine used as a weapon of war, and widespread rape and torture of Palestinian captives. The list of crimes is almost endless. So while Palestinians are relieved that a ceasefire is about to take effect, the level of pain and suffering that they've gone through is just unimaginable. However, we also need to recognize that true liberation and justice for Palestine will not come until this racist, ethno-supremacist state of Israel comes to an end. In this video, I want to explain what the reported conditions of the ceasefire are, why this agreement signifies a humiliating defeat for Israel, why they were pressurized into signing it, and what we can expect moving forward. So what are the conditions for the ceasefire? The ceasefire deal unfolds in 3 phases. In the first phase, which is starting on Sunday, January the 19th, and will last around 6 weeks, then what's expected is that Hamas will release 33 out of 94 Israeli captives in exchange for 1,000 Palestinian captives. Israel is also expected to allow 600 aid trucks per day to enter Gaza. Palestinians will be allowed to return to their homes in the north of Gaza. Injured Palestinians can leave Gaza for treatment. A Rafah border controlled by Israel currently will be reopened, and Israeli forces will reduce their presence in the Philadelphia corridor, that's the border between Gaza and Egypt. In phase 2, the details will be negotiated in phase 1, but what is expected generally to begin around the March the 1st is that Hamas will release the remaining living Israeli captives in exchange for further Palestinian hostages held by Israel. Israeli forces are expected to completely withdraw from Gaza, including the Philadelphia corridor as well as the Netzarim corridor. This is the corridor that bisects Gaza, splitting north from south. And then in phase 3, which begins around April 12th, the remaining dead Israeli captives will be returned in exchange for a 3 to 5 year reconstruction plan for Gaza under international supervision. Importantly, and I want you to note this, that nothing in the agreement suggests that Hamas needs to be disbanded or that they need to be removed from power in Gaza. So then why is this humiliating defeat for Israel? So let's remind ourselves of Israel's stated war aims. They wanted firstly to destroy Hamas completely, not just to weaken them or take out a few leaders, but eradicate them entirely. But this hasn't happened. Hamas remains militarily viable, continuing to attack. And like just last week, where they killed 2 Israeli soldiers. The ceasefire agreement makes no mention, as I've mentioned before, of disbanding Hamas or stopping them from governing Gaza. So in terms of Israel's war aims in this particular issue, they have failed to achieve this even after 15 months of brutal bombardment and onslaught. The second war aim for Israel was that they wanted to undertake military actions in order to release Israeli prisoners that were taken on October the 7th. But again, this hasn't happened. Instead, what's happening is what Hamas wanted originally, which was to exchange Israeli war prisoners for Hamas or Palestinian war prisoners that held by Israel. So again, they've been forced into negotiating with Hamas for a prisoner swap deal. So if you enter a conflict and fail to meet your stated conflict goals, then enter after which a ceasefire, it's a clear sign of defeat. You've been failed to achieve your stated conflict war aims. But Israel's goals weren't just official, they were also unofficial aims. It's been widely reported and documented by organizations like the Law for Palestine that Israel was aimed to ethnically cleanse Gaza and settle Zionist colonies in their place. For instance, Israeli Agricultural Minister Avi Dichter told Israeli Channel 12, "We are rolling out the Gaza Nakba." He's referring to the Nakba that took place in 1948, the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in order to create the Israeli state. So he's talking about the Gaza Nakba, which was to ethnically cleanse Gaza of Palestinians in order to establish colonial Zionist settlements in their place. Similarly, Prime Minister Netanyahu made genocidal statements when he compared the Palestinians to the Amalekites. These are an ancient group of people that's mentioned in the Torah who are meant to be completely wiped out according to the order of God. Every man, woman, child, even farmyard animals. So when he's comparing the Palestinians in Gaza to the Amalekites, he's talking about genocide and ethnic cleansing. It's pretty clear. We also saw Zionists salivating over the potential colonization of Gaza, like we see in this clip.
Will these Israeli settlers' dreams come true?
I just think we need to kill them, every one of them, and that's it.
See, Israel had hoped to force the Palestinians out of Gaza, either through unbearable living conditions or outright expulsion. But this attempt of ethnic cleansing has failed. Palestinians resisted, even though they paid an enormous price, standing firm against one of the most powerful military forces in the world. The ceasefire agreement, which involves Israeli forces withdrawing, proves Israel has not been able to change the map of Gaza as they intended. You see, both the official and unofficial stated war aims have not been met under this ceasefire agreement. They have failed. So it's not surprising then that some in Netanyahu's government have rejected the ceasefire deal. For example, figures like Ben Gvir and Smotrich have criticized it, calling it bad and dangerous for Israel. Zionist protesters have even taken to the streets, claiming it means surrender and a threat to Israel's security, i.e. this ceasefire agreement. So it's clear the ceasefire is a humiliation for the Zionist entity. This is how it's being perceived even by the Zionists itself. Israel has not achieved any of its war aims, whether official or unofficially stated ones. But it gets worse for Israel because over the past 15 months, the Zionist entity has turned itself into a pariah state. It's blatantly violated international law and basic morality, and these are clear for everyone to see. Israel is now facing an international court of justice ruling on genocide, as well as arrest warrants from international criminal courts for leaders like Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. The toll on Israel is severe. Thousands of Israeli troops have either been killed or wounded, its economy is in shambles, and its military has been exposed as vulnerable, with its Iron Dome failing against Iranian drone and missile attacks. Israel's survival is clear for everyone to see. Without the billions of dollars and military support it gets from America and the West, it just wouldn't be able to survive. Even with all these advantages, being one of the strongest militaries in the world, having all the support from America and the West, it's still been forced into this humiliating ceasefire agreement. So why now? Why has Israel been forced into this deal? America gave Israel time to change the reality on the ground, but it failed to do so. The US long-term plans for the region involve creating a security pact with Israel, Egypt, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, an alliance to counter the influence of China and Russia and maintain America's hegemony in the region. But the instability in the Middle East, exacerbated by the horrors of Gaza, makes these plans impossible. Arab and Muslim populations are furious at the complicity of their rulers with the Zionist entity, and there is a fear that there will be an Arab Spring 2.0 similar to the one in 2011, where we saw uprisings and the removal of various rulers in the Arab world. And the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad and the political shifts across the Arab world have just shaken the foundation of regimes, particularly like those in Egypt and Jordan. These leaders are terrified that they could be next. So America is now pushing Israel to accept a ceasefire. The carrot: if Israel agrees, the US will push for normalization with Saudi Arabia, an essential part of the regional strategy. But this normalization comes at a terrible cost. It comes at the betrayal of the Palestinian blood, not only for the past 15 months, but also for decades since 1948, when the settler colonial state of Israel was created. Israel's defeat, though clear, is not the end of the story. The Palestinians still remain occupied. Palestinian refugees from both 1948 and 1967 still are prevented from returning to their homes that they were expelled from. And the potential for another massacre, as we've witnessed for the past 15 months, remain very real in the near future. So we shouldn't think that this is job done. We've now achieved it just because there's a ceasefire. They are still under occupation. They're still suffering from oppression. They're still suffering from this ethno-supremacist state, and they will likely face another onslaught in the coming years to come. However, there is also optimism in that the Palestinians have shown to us bravery, steadfastness and resistance against a brutal onslaught and occupation. Not only that, but we also witnessed in the last 15 months the overthrow of Bashar al-Assad, one of the most brutal dictators in the Arab and Muslim world. He's been removed even after 13 years of struggle by the Syrians. The point is, what we have witnessed is not just bravery, steadfastness, but also the potential change in the Muslim world. You see, we've seen how weak Israel is. We've seen the complicity of the Arab and Muslim rulers, but at the same time, we have seen that Muslims have agency. They're able to stand up against oppression, even overthrow Bashar al-Assad, bi'idhnillah, by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So therefore, there is optimism, there is potential for change in the future. Furthermore, the Muslim world isn't weak. We've seen that. More than ever can we see that there is a need to reverse the Sykes-Picot Agreement. You know, the one that carved up the Muslim lands between the French and the British colonialists so that the Muslim lands remained weak, and then installed puppet regimes to keep us down. So if anything, we need to take the lessons from the last 15 months and realize that if one of the most powerful entities in the world can be humbled, then we shouldn't be seen and we shouldn't see ourselves as weak. If a stateless people like the Palestinians can resist a potential genocide, then what about a unified ummah of 2 billion Muslims? Muslims unified under a sincere Islamic leadership that unified our armed forces, our resources, our geopolitical strength and abilities. You see, we've witnessed the Iman both in Syria and Palestine. But what's missing really is a sincere leadership, one that's built on Islam and one that's within the reach of this ummah, bi'idhnillah, by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why do I say it's within the reach of the ummah? Because we've shown the capabilities of this ummah, because they have that desire, that iman, that steadfastness. But what they need is the resources that are unified behind that steadfastness, that a sincere leadership is able to unify that, and the ummah will unify behind that. Just like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said in hadith, he said the imam, the leader of the Muslims, is a shield from which we fight behind and a shield from which we defend ourselves. This is what we need. We need to have that shield. So while we're relieved at the cessation of hostilities, we should now strive more than ever to come to the aid of the Palestinians, to liberate them, because that power is there, the capability is there. We just need the Islamic leadership, inshallah.